Have you ever wondered how a single decision can crumble everything you built in 15 years? How 1,200 words can transform a promising career into ashes before the sun even rises? Robert Kim was about to find out. It was a Thursday night in Chicago, and the cold October air carried that electric tension that only big cities know. The Chicago Tribune office was silent, except for the rhythmic sound of Robert's fingers hitting the keyboard. Each pressed key echoed like an irreversible decision. Each typed word weighed like lead in the dense atmosphere of that nearly empty newsroom. Robert Kim was 38 years old, and 15 of them dedicated to sports journalism. 15 years chasing stories, building sources, earning respect. But you could notice that something had changed in recent months. The numbers didn't lie. Views were falling like leaves in autumn. Readers were migrating to faster, bolder, more ruthless blogs. His editor, James Wilson, had been clear in the morning meeting. "Robert, we need something big. Something that makes people stop scrolling and pay attention. Jordan is retired from basketball. The Bulls are lukewarm, and our competitors are eating us alive." The smell of cold coffee and old paper filled the newsroom. Robert could feel the weight of those words in his chest, that constant pressure that transforms journalists into headline hunters at any cost. How many times in life have you already felt that you needed to prove your worth? That an opportunity was slipping through your fingers like sand? That's when the email arrived. The computer ping cut through the silence like a knife. Unknown sender. Subject: information about MJ that you need to have. Robert felt his heart race. That type of message usually meant two things: a big story or a big trap. Sometimes, both at the same time. He opened the email with trembling fingers. The words on the screen glowed like dangerous promises. The message was short, direct, incendiary. Insinuations about the circumstances of Michael Jordan's father's death, a tragedy that had happened a few years earlier. Insinuations about connections that were never explored, questions that were never asked. Great stories never come from comfortable places, Robert murmured to himself, as if those words could justify what he was about to do. But something deep in his conscience whispered a warning. That small voice that every journalist knows, the one that separates investigation from exploitation, truth from sensation. Robert swallowed hard and ignored the whisper. You can notice that there are moments in life where we choose to ignore what we know is right. Moments where ambition speaks louder than conscience. And that was exactly what happened on that cold October night. Robert began to write. The words flowed too fast, too dangerous. He shaped the article as an investigation, using careful terms like unanswered questions and mysterious circumstances. But behind the technical language, there was a veiled accusation, a toxic insinuation that questioned not Michael Jordan's ability as an athlete, but something much deeper, his character as a man and son. The title was born like thunder. The questions that Michael Jordan never answered. Investigating the mysteries behind the family tragedy. Isn't it incredible how 16 words can carry so much poison? Robert reread the article 3 times. With each reading, that internal voice screamed louder. "This is wrong! You're crossing a line!" But the pressure for relevance, for numbers, for proving he was still important, all of that muffled the voice of reason like a heavy blanket over a small flame. At 10:47 p.m. that Thursday, Robert moved the cursor to the Publish button. His hand hovered over the mouse like a hesitant bird before the dive. The air conditioning hummed softly, indifferent to the weight of that moment. Outside, Chicago continued its nightlife, unaware that 1,200 words were about to change everything. One click, just one click. The article went live at 11:00 p.m. sharp. Robert watched the numbers begin to climb on the dashboard. 10 views, 50, 200, 500, 1,000 in 20 minutes. His heart was beating fast, not with pride, but with something he still couldn't name. Fear? Guilt? Toxic excitement? He sent the link to James Wilson with a simple message. Big story. Published. It's going viral. The response came in 30 seconds. What the hell did you do, Robert? Something in the tone of those 5 words made Robert's stomach turn. But it was too late. The article was out there, being shared, commented on, disseminated like fire in dry forest. The internet doesn't forget. The internet doesn't forgive. Robert shut down the computer at 11:45 p.m. The office was now completely dark, illuminated only by the amber light from the street lamps, filtering through the tall windows. He grabbed his coat and walked to the elevator with steps that echoed hollow in the empty corridor. On the way home, Robert turned on the car radio. The night programming talked about the White Sox game, weather forecast, traffic. Nothing about his article yet. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, everyone will be talking about it. He had no idea how right he was, but he also had no idea of the price he would pay for that attention. When Robert arrived home, his wife, Sarah Mitchell, was already sleeping. He lay down beside her in silence, looking at the dark ceiling. The digital clock showed 00:34. Technically, it was already Friday. 24 hours. He had 24 hours before everything collapsed. But in that moment, lying in the dark, Robert Kim still believed he had written just another story. A big, controversial story, but just a story. How wrong he was. Great things happen when nobody is watching. Sometimes they're good things. Sometimes they're decisions that destroy entire lives. And sometimes they're both things at the same time, depending on how you choose to learn from them. Robert's cell phone rested on the nightstand, silent for now. But out there, in the digital world that never sleeps, the article continued spreading. Comment after comment. Share after share. And somewhere, people that Robert would never meet were reading his words and feeling that toxic mixture of shock and indignation. Among those people was someone that Robert never imagined would read the article so soon. Someone who was awake in that Friday dawn, browsing on his tablet, when he came across the title that questioned the memory of his deceased father. Michael Jordan read the article in silence. He didn't call lawyers. He didn't make furious calls. He didn't post on social media. He simply read, felt the weight of those insinuations about the person he loved most, and turned off the tablet. Michael Jordan's silence would be deafening. But Robert didn't know that yet. He was still sleeping, oblivious to the fact that his life as he knew it had exactly 7 hours and 26 minutes remaining. The morning arrived with that kind of golden light that Chicago offers on autumn days. The sun crossed through the curtains of Robert Kim's bedroom like gentle fingers, promising an ordinary day. But there's nothing ordinary about waking up to discover you destroyed your own career. Robert's cell phone started vibrating at 7:53 in the morning. Once, twice, 10 times, 20. The incessant buzzing cut through the morning silence like a distant siren getting closer and closer, more urgent, more threatening. Robert grabbed the phone with still sleepy eyes. The screen glowed with 247 notifications. Emails, messages, mentions on social media. His heart raced before he even processed what he was seeing. That adrenaline rush that every journalist knows when a story goes viral. For a fleeting moment, a moment as brief as a sigh, Robert felt pride. "I did it," he murmured, still half asleep. The story went viral. But as his fingers began to slide across the screen, that pride transformed into something cold, something that climbed up his spine like ice melting in reverse. The comments weren't of admiration. They weren't congratulations for the great investigation. They were devastating. This is journalism? Exploiting someone's father's death for clicks? Robert Kim should be ashamed. This isn't investigation. It's cruelty. How does the Tribune allow this kind of sensationalist garbage? Have you ever felt that moment where you realize you made an irreversible mistake? That moment where the air becomes dense, your stomach turns, and you know there's no going back. That was exactly what Robert was feeling. Sarah appeared in the bedroom doorway, holding a cup of coffee. She looked at her husband's pale face and asked, "What happened?" Robert couldn't answer. He just kept scrolling the screen, reading comment after comment, each one more condemning than the previous. Experienced journalists he respected were sharing the article with devastating criticism. Professional colleagues were questioning his ethics. Sources he cultivated for years were publicly distancing themselves. But what really made Robert's heart stop was a tweet from Marcus Williams, veteran editor at ESPN. "In 30 years of sports journalism, I've never seen anyone cross this line. Exploiting the death of Michael Jordan's father for relevance? There are sacred boundaries. Robert Kim just discovered this in the worst possible way." The tweet had 42,000 shares. How is it possible that everything collapses so fast? How can 247 notifications carry the weight of 15 years of career falling apart? The phone rang. James Wilson, his editor. Robert answered with trembling hands. "My office. Now." Wilson's voice didn't carry anger, but something worse. Disappointment. That tone of someone who trusted and was betrayed. Robert arrived at the Tribune newsroom at 9:15 a.m. The path from the entrance to Wilson's office seemed like kilometers. Colleagues averted their eyes. Some looked with pity. Others with something that resembled disgust. The air was charged with that tension that arises when everyone knows something terrible before you officially know. Wilson's office smelled of old leather and strong coffee. The editor was sitting behind his desk, fingers interlaced, expression indecipherable. Beside him, there were 2 people from the legal department and someone from human resources. "Sit down, Robert." Robert sat. The leather of the chair creaked under his weight, too loud in the heavy silence of the room. "The source," Wilson began, voice controlled but firm. "The so-called anonymous source you cited in the article. Did you verify it?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Robert felt cold sweat run down the back of his neck. "I received the email. The information seemed consistent with—" "Seemed?" Wilson interrupted. "You published an article questioning Michael Jordan's character based on information that seemed consistent?" The silence that followed was deafening. You can notice that there are moments where words are unnecessary, where the weight of the mistake is so obvious that any explanation sounds empty. "Our legal department spent the night reviewing the article," Wilson treats, continued. "The insinuations, the unanswered questions, the entire structure of the text. Robert, you didn't write an investigation. You wrote a piece of poorly disguised defamation based on speculation and an unverified source. One of the lawyers leaned forward. The article was removed from the site at 3 o'clock in the morning, but the damage is done. It was shared thousands of times, copied to dozens of other sites. It's everywhere. Robert felt the walls closing in. And Jordan? Is he going to sue? That's when something happened that Robert didn't expect. Wilson slowly shook his head. That's the most disturbing part of all this, Robert. Michael Jordan did nothing. Not a public statement. Not a legal threat. Not a word. Nothing? Robert frowned, confused. Nothing. Complete silence. But his family issued a statement through an advisor. A single sentence. Some things are sacred. Those 4 words hit Robert like a punch to the stomach. Some things are sacred. The by memory of a deceased father. The pain of a son. The grief that never really ends. Everything that Robert had exploited for views was summarized in those 4 simple and devastating words. Isn't it incredible how the shortest words carry the heaviest weights? Jordan's silence is more powerful than any lawsuit would be, the lawyer added. He's letting the community judge. And they've already judged. Wilson stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the busy Chicago street. Cars passed. People walked. Life continued. Indifferent to the small drama happening in that office? Robert, how long have you worked here? 15 years. 15 years. And in 15 years, you built reputation, relationships, trust. All of that. All of that collapsed in one night. Wilson turned, tired eyes. I'm suspending you, Robert. Suspension without pay. Effective immediately. Human resources will guide you on the next steps. Robert felt the ground disappear under his feet. James, I can explain. The pressure for numbers, the competition. I just wanted... You wanted what? Wilson cut him off, voice finally showing the contained anger. You wanted clicks, views, relevance? And to get that, you trampled on the memory of a dead man, exploited the pain of a family, and destroyed your own integrity. For what, Robert? For 500,000 views. The words echoed in the room like shots, each one finding its target with surgical precision. 24 hours, Wilson said, returning to his chair. 24 hours from publication to your suspension. That has to be some kind of record. Robert left the office like a zombie. The walk back through the corridor was even worse than the arrival. Now everyone officially knew. Suspension without pay was code for, your career here is over. He arrived at his desk, grabbed some personal belongings, a photo with Sarah, a journalism award from 5 years ago, a pen that his mentor gave him when he started at the Tribune, objects that now seemed like relics from another life. His phone vibrated again, another avalanche of notifications. But now they were different. They weren't just comments about the article. They were about his suspension. News travels fast in the journalism world. Robert Kim suspended from Chicago Tribune after controversial article about Michael Jordan. Journalist faces consequences for exploiting death of MJ's father. Career in ruins. The rapid fall of Robert Kim. Robert sat on the edge of his desk, looking at the busy newsroom. Reporters working, phones ringing, the constant rhythm of a living newspaper. Everything continued. Life continued. But he was outside of it now. How many times in life have you wished you could go back in time? Undo a decision? Rewrite a moment? Robert grabbed his things and walked to the elevator for the last time, as an employee of the Chicago Tribune. On the way down, alone in that metal box, he finally let the tears roll. Not tears of self-pity, but of something deeper. The realization of what he had done, the person he had become. Great things happen when nobody is watching, but sometimes the eyes that matter most are your own. And Robert was finally seeing himself clearly for the first time in a long time. The image wasn't pretty. Outside, Chicago continued under its blue autumn sky. People walked hurriedly, living their lives, chasing their dreams. And somewhere in that city, Michael Jordan continued in silence. Didn't need to say anything. Didn't need to do anything. Sometimes silence says everything that needs to be said. Some things are sacred. Robert had learned that the hardest way possible. But the real question still hung in the cold air of that morning. Would this lesson be just the beginning? Or would it be the end? Only time would tell. And time, as Robert was about to discover, can be both cruel and merciful. 6 days had passed since the suspension. 6 days that felt like 6 months. Robert Kim was sitting on the couch of his house in a Chicago suburb, surrounded by a silence that wasn't peace, but absence. Absence of purpose. Absence of direction. Absence of the person he used to be. The house smelled of cold coffee and reheated pizzas. Sarah had returned to work after 3 days trying to cheer him up, realizing that sometimes a person needs to cross the dark valley alone. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, creating stripes of light on the wooden floor. Dust danced in, the golden rays, indifferent to the existential crisis happening in that room. The laptop was open on the coffee table, but Robert couldn't write. Not an email. Not a note. Not an apology. Because how do you apologize for something like this? How do you put into words the regret of having used someone's deepest pain as a stepping stone for your own relevance? Have you ever been awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, reliving every wrong decision, wishing you could enter that time, machine that doesn't exist, and scream to your past self, "Don't do it! Stop!" That's how Robert spent every night. But what gnawed at Robert the most wasn't the suspension. It wasn't the job loss. It was something deeper, more visceral. It was the slow and painful realization of who he had become without noticing. He tried to justify himself. It was my job to investigate. Journalists asked difficult questions. I was under pressure for numbers. The excuses came easy in the first 48 hours. But now, alone in the silence of his house, with nobody to convince except himself, the excuses sounded hollow, empty, pathetic. The phone rang. Robert looked at the screen. Unknown number. He ignored it. In the last 6 days, he had ignored dozens of calls. Other journalists wanting comments, offers from sensationalist blogs wanting him to tell his side of the story. Even an agent wanting to turn the controversy into a book. Everyone wanted to exploit his tragedy the same way he had exploited Jordan's. The irony wasn't lost on him. That's when Robert saw the cardboard box in the corner of the room. Sarah had brought his things from the Tribune office. He still hadn't had the courage to open it. But now, on that 6th day of self-imposed isolation, he got up and walked to the box. Inside, among pens and yellowed post-its, was an old folder, his portfolio, articles he had written over the years, stories about high school athletes overcoming adversities, profiles of dedicated coaches, reports about communities united by sports. Robert leafed through the pages, and each article was like a ghost of the journalist he used to be. A journalist who cared about human stories, who saw sports as a window into people's souls, who respected the boundaries between informing and exploiting. When had he lost that? When had the search for numbers become more important than the search for truth? When had he decided that clicks were worth more than character? There's no specific moment. It's impossible to identify the exact second where you cross the line. It's gradual, a small concession here, a justification there. Just this once. Everyone does it. I need to stay relevant. Until one day you wake up and no longer recognize the person in the mirror. Robert closed the portfolio and grabbed the laptop. For the first time in 6 days, he began to write. But not an article. Not a defense. A letter. A public letter of apology that would be different from all those empty corporate statements that celebrities publish when they're caught in scandals. He began, "My name is Robert Kim, and I made a terrible mistake." The words flowed now, not easy, but necessary, like dropping anchor in a storm, painful but essential to not be carried away by the current. 6 days ago, I published an article that exploited the death of Michael Jordan's father. I told myself I was doing investigative journalism. I was lying. To you and to myself. I was doing cheap sensationalism, exploiting the pain of a family for views and relevance. You can notice that there's something liberating about finally telling the truth, even when that truth is ugly, even when it reveals your worst weaknesses. Robert continued, "There's no excuse. I won't blame the industry's pressure, although it exists. I won't blame my editor, although there were expectations. I won't blame the source, although it was dubious. Because in the end, I chose. I read that email. I wrote every word. I clicked publish. Those were my choices, and I carry the weight of them." He stopped, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The next part would be the most difficult. The part where he didn't ask for forgiveness. Because forgiveness wasn't something he deserved yet. Forgiveness is earned through actions, not words. Michael Jordan owes me nothing. His family owes me nothing. The readers owe me nothing. I'm the one who owes. I owe them the truth. I owe them the acknowledgement that I crossed, not just a professional line, but a fundamental human line. Some things are sacred. The memory of a dead father is one of them. And I trampled on that sacredness for clicks. The tears blurred the text on the screen. Robert wiped them and continued. "I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that you see this as a reminder. A reminder that we, journalists, have power. The power to inform or destroy, to illuminate or exploit, to elevate or diminish. And with that power comes a responsibility that I completely ignored." He ended the letter with a single sentence. "I will spend the rest of my career, if I still have one, trying to be the journalist I should have been that Thursday night." Robert posted the letter on his personal blog at 4:37 p.m. on a Thursday, exactly 1 week after publishing the article. The symmetry wasn't planned, but seemed appropriate. He didn't expect it to go viral, didn't expect it to matter, but he needed to write it. Not for public redemption, for his own redemption. The letter was read by 42,000 people in the first 3 hours. The comments came in waves, some still full of anger, some skeptical, but some different. This doesn't erase what you did, but it's a start. Rare for someone to admit mistakes like this. Long road ahead. Second chances must be earned. Prove you deserve it. Robert read every comment, all of them, even the cruel ones, especially the cruel ones, because they were deserved, and because part of taking responsibility is fully facing the consequences. Sarah arrived home at 7 p.m., found Robert in the kitchen, making dinner for the first time in a week. She didn't say anything, just hugged her husband for a long moment. "I read the letter," she said finally. "And?" "And it was honest. Painful, but honest." Robert nodded. "It doesn't change anything." "No," Sarah agreed, "but it's the first step." That night, lying in bed, Robert thought about Michael Jordan, the man he had hurt, the man who had remained silent while the world defended him. The silence that had been more powerful than any scream. How is it possible that silence teaches more than 1,000 words? That the absence of revenge is more impactful than any retaliation? Great things happen when nobody is watching, and sometimes the greatest transformations happen in silence, in the space between mistake and regret, between the fall and the first step to get up. Robert didn't know if Jordan had read his letter, didn't know if he would ever be forgiven, didn't know if he would have another chance in journalism. But for the first time in a week, he managed to sleep without waking up at 3 in the morning in panic. Because for the first time, he had stopped hiding, stopped making excuses, stopped being the person who wrote that article, and started the long process of becoming the person who could look in the mirror again. The path would be long, steep, painful. But every journey begins with a first step. And that letter, however imperfect it was his. On the other side of the city, somewhere, Michael Jordan continued his life. Had he read the letter? Had it mattered? These were mysteries that Robert didn't have the right to know yet. But the universe has strange ways of responding. And sometimes, second chances come from the most unlikely places. From people who understood more about redemption than anyone could imagine. That chance was coming. But Robert didn't know that yet. 6 months had passed like leaves carried by the wind. April had arrived in Chicago with that timid warmth that promises summer, but still carries the freshness of spring. Robert Kim was sitting in an office much smaller than the one at the Chicago Tribune. An office at the Oak Brook Gazette, a suburban community newspaper that covered high school soccer games and city council meetings. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay well, but it was real. It was honest. And after everything that had happened, Robert learned to value reality over glamour, integrity over prestige. The editor of the Oak Brook Gazette, Daniel Patel, had been the only one willing to give Robert a chance. Not out of pity, but because he read the public letter, read the honesty there, and decided that second chances should exist for those genuinely willing to change. "You'll cover high school sports," Daniel had said in the interview. "No big names, no sensational headlines, just human stories about boys and girls chasing dreams. Can you do that without stepping on someone?" Robert had answered with the only truth that mattered. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying." That April afternoon, Robert was at a high school gymnasium in Oak Brook. The place smelled of rubber sneakers and teenage sweat. The sound of balls hitting the wooden floor echoed like heartbeats. About 200 people filled the bleachers to watch the regional championship basketball game. Robert was there to cover the story of Tyler Brooks, a 17-year-old boy who had lost his father in a car accident 2 years ago and now led his team in points and assists. But it wasn't about the statistics. It should never have been about statistics. During warm-up, Robert noticed something. In the corner of the gymnasium, there was a simple memorial. A discreet plaque with a man's photo and some words. "In memory of David Rodriguez, 1978 to 2021. Father, coach, mentor. His legacy lives on in every shot, every pass, every dream pursued on this court." David Rodriguez had been assistant coach, until his unexpected death from a heart attack. His son, Lucas Rodriguez, was playing that night. It was his last game before graduating and going to college with a basketball scholarship. Have you ever had those moments where the universe seems to orchestrate something specifically for you? Where a lesson you needed to learn appears so clearly that it would be impossible to ignore it. After the game, which Oakbrook won by 3 points on a last-second shot by Lucas, Robert interviewed the boys. But he didn't ask questions about the game. He asked questions about what it meant to play with someone's legacy on your shoulders. What it meant to honor the memory of a loved one through action, not words. Tyler Brooks, his eyes still bright from the game's adrenaline, said something that made Robert pause. "My father never saw me play in high school, but I play each game as if he were here. Not to prove anything, just to honor him by doing something he loved." Lucas Rodriguez added, voice choked, "People ask if the pressure is great, if it's difficult to play under his memorial. But it's not pressure, it's purpose. Every time I step on this court, I remember that some things are bigger than basketball. Some things are about legacy, memory, love. Some things are sacred." Those words echoed in Robert's mind. The same words from the Jordan family's statement. The same words that had collapsed his career and begun his transformation. That night, back at the Gazette's tiny office, Robert wrote. But not like he wrote before. Not hunting for controversial angles. Not seeking clicks. Just telling honest human story about 2 boys honoring fathers who were no longer there. About love that transcends loss. About legacies built not in headlines, but in moments. The article had 642 words, half the size of the Jordan article that had destroyed his career. But each word carried different weight. Weight of truth, of respect, of recovered humanity. Daniel Patel read the article and nodded in approval. That's journalism, Robert. Keep it up." The article was published in the Gazette's print edition on Friday. Small newspaper, small circulation, small impact. Or so Robert thought. On Sunday, the article was shared on the school's Facebook page, then on the basketball team's account, then by some players to their friends, and then in a way that only happens when something is genuinely good, it started to spread. Not go viral, spread. There's a difference. Going viral is fast, violent, chaotic. Spreading is organic, intentional, because it touches something real in people. The article reached the Chicago Tribune through an editor who had worked with Robert years ago. It reached ESPN through a producer who was looking for authentic human stories. And it reached, in a way that Robert could never fully track, someone very specific. 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Thursday in May, Robert received an envelope without a return address at the office. The paper was thick, quality. Inside, there was a ticket for the Bulls game that night. Besides the ticket, a simple note, handwritten, "Second chances matter. MJ." Robert held the note with trembling hands. Read it once, twice, 10 times. It couldn't be. But it was. The handwriting was unmistakable to anyone who had ever seen Michael Jordan autographs. How many times in life do you receive something you don't deserve? Something so gracious that it disarms all your guilt and shame? It's not frequent. And when it happens, it's devastating in a beautiful way. Sarah insisted on going with him to the game. "You're not facing this alone," she said. The United Center was packed that night. The roar of the crowd, the smell of popcorn and beer, the electric energy of a playoff game. Robert and Sarah were in decent seats, not courtside, but good. The ticket wasn't about privilege. It was about invitation. At halftime of the third quarter, Robert stood up to get water. In the narrow corridor behind the bleachers, he almost collided with someone. When he looked up, his heart stopped. Michael Jordan was there. Not in uniform, of course. Jordan had been retired for years. But there, in person, tall and imposing as always, wearing an impeccable suit. For a moment that seemed like eternity. The two men looked at each other. Robert couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All the prepared excuses, all the rehearsed words disappeared. It was Jordan who spoke first. Calm voice, without anger, but with that intensity that had defined his entire career. Did you learn? 2 words, just 2 words, but they carried the weight of 6 months of journey, of pain, regret, transformation. Robert swallowed hard. Every day. Jordan nodded slowly. It wasn't dramatic forgiveness. It wasn't a cinematic reconciliation hug. It was recognition. From a man who understood mistakes, understood journeys, understood that redemption isn't a moment, but a process. I read your article about the boys, about their fathers. Jordan paused. It was respectful. It was real. Keep doing that. I'm sorry. The words came out before Robert could stop them. For the article, for what I wrote about your father, there's no excuse. There's no... Jordan raised his hand, gently interrupting. I know. Your letter made it clear. Your work in recent months makes it clear. I don't need more apologies, Robert. I need you to keep being the journalist you've been. The one who respects boundaries. The one who remembers there are real people behind the stories. You can notice that true forgiveness isn't always about dramatic words. Sometimes it's about second chance given quietly. About recognizing genuine change. About seeing that someone did the internal work of transformation. My father, Jordan continued, voice softer now, used to say that people deserve to be judged not by their worst moments, but by what they do after those moments. You did the work. Keep doing it. Before Robert could respond, Jordan extended his hand. A simple handshake. Firm. And then he was gone, disappearing into the busy corridor as he appeared. Robert stood there, looking at his own hand as if he could still feel that grip, as if he could hold that moment forever. When he returned to the seat, Sarah looked at his expression and understood. Was it him? Robert just nodded, unable to speak. The tears came now, but not from sadness, from something he hadn't felt in 6 months, something like peace. The game continued. The Bulls won by 12 points. The crowd vibrated. Robert and Sarah celebrated together. And somewhere in that giant arena, in the middle of 19,000 people, Robert Kim felt something he hadn't felt since that fateful Thursday in October. He felt that maybe, just maybe, there was still space for him in this world. Not as the journalist he had been, but as the journalist he was becoming. 3 months later, the Chicago Tribune offered Robert a bi-weekly column. Not a column about big names or headlines. A column about forgotten stories, high school athletes, volunteer coaches, communities united by sports, the stories that really mattered. Daniel Patel graciously not only released Robert from the Gazette, but wrote the most effusive recommendation that an editor could write. He fell, Daniel wrote, but he had the courage to get up and do the work to change. If we, Idorn, don't believe in redemption, what do we believe in? Robert's first column in the Tribune was published on a Thursday, 9 months after the Jordan article. Enough time for true transformation. The title was simple. Lessons from a High School Gymnasium. Why the smallest stories are the biggest. In it, he talked about Tyler Brooks and Lucas Rodriguez, about legacies and memories, about respect for sacred things. And in the last paragraph, without mentioning Jordan or his own scandal, he wrote, "In the end, journalism isn't about headlines or views. It's about people. Real, flawed, magnificent people living lives that deserve to be told with dignity. It took me a lifetime to learn this. But some lessons, however painful they are the ones most worth it." Sarah read the column on the morning of publication, sitting at the kitchen table with hot coffee, and smiled. "Your father would be proud," she said. Robert thought about that, about legacies, about making the people we love proud, even when they're no longer here to see. About Michael Jordan honoring his father every day of his life, defending that memory with powerful silence when it was attacked. Great things happen when nobody is watching. Robert had learned that, had lived that, and now, finally, was honoring that. His career would never be the same. Wouldn't return to the top of sports journalism as a star, but maybe that was better. Because at the top, it's easy to forget what really matters. It's easy to confuse relevance with purpose, views with value. Robert wrote his columns every Thursday night now. At 11 p.m., the time he had published that article months ago, he would stop and reflect. Not as punishment, but as reminder of where he had been, of how far he had come, of how much more he had to grow. And every few months, he received a brief email from an address that had no sender name. Just 2 words that became a mantra. Keep going. Robert was never absolutely certain who sent it, but he had a strong suspicion. And every time, those 2 words gave fuel for another 6 months. For more stories. For more growth. Because redemption isn't a destination. It's a journey. Continuous, unending, always evolving. You don't get there and stop. You keep going. Every day choosing to be better than yesterday. Every day honoring second chances not with words, but with actions. Robert Kim had destroyed his career in 24 hours and spent the next years rebuilding not just the IT career, but himself. Brick by brick, story by story, word by word. Some things are sacred. He had learned that the hardest way, but the lesson had stuck. And now he would spend the rest of his life being guardian of that truth. Not just in journalism, but in everything. In the end, it wasn't about Michael Jordan having forgiven. It was about Robert having learned, having changed, having become someone worthy of a second chance. And maybe that's the most universal lesson of all, that we all make mistakes, cross lines, lose our way. But what really defines us isn't the mistake. It's what we do after. If we have the courage to look in the mirror, admit the truth, and do the painful work of real change. Robert did that work. And in doing so, he discovered something he never expected to find on the other side of tragedy. Not just a second chance, but a better version of himself. Great things happen when nobody is watching, and the greatest redemptions happen in the silent spaces between fall and rise, between mistake and change, between who we were and who we choose to become. That was Robert Kim's journey. From reporter who disrespected Michael Jordan to journalist who understood the true meaning of integrity. It took 24 hours to destroy everything. It took a lifetime to rebuild it correctly. But each day of that reconstruction was worth it. Because, in the end, he wasn't just writing better stories. He was living one, and continues living, every Thursday night, every respectful story, every choice of dignity over sensation. Keep going, Robert. Keep going.